Alright, in this video I'm going to go over something I've seen a few people do here, and you've probably seen it posted on my blog at saltyoldgeek.com, is setting up Ollama with Open WebUI to use as your own private AI, like a private chat GPT. We're going to do this, we're going to go through the steps of doing this on a Raspberry Pi 5, 8 gigs of RAM. I'll have Amazon affiliate links below. And we're going to do the initial setup, pull the model, start Open WebUI, and then we'll go over a couple of things that you need to do in order to make that work. So first, let's go ahead and get to the command line, and we're going to go ahead. I'm already SSH'd into my machine. Let's pull that up here. And the first thing we're going to want to do is pull down Ollama. Now, in the links below, you'll see the command here for putting Ollama on the machine. It's a curl command. This is going to take a few minutes to install. It's basically going to clone and install. Now, if you want to update Ollama, this is the same thing that you're going to do here. You're going to do the same exact command. It's just going to pull it and re-overwrite it. The configs should stay the same. It should remember all the models that you have installed. So we'll let this install, and then we'll come back to that in a minute, and we'll go ahead and go on to pulling the model, and then we'll go on to setting up Open WebUI. All right, we're done. And as you're going to see here, highlight this warning at the bottom, you can ignore that. We don't have any GPU on here. We don't have an NVIDIA GPU. Now, where you can, if you choose to, use the PCIe extension to go to a mini PCIe bus, and you can use that in daisy chain with another one in order to actually hook up an external graphics card. If you're interested in doing something like that, check out Jeff Geerling's channel. He has a great one on putting that all together. That one's more geared towards vision, but the eGPU will definitely work in this instance. Now that we've got this down, we're going to go ahead and pull a model. And you can find those if you just Google Ollama model list. You'll find a list of a whole bunch of models to use. We are going to do Llama pull, then we're going to put in the model we want. And in this case, we're going to try something different. DeepSeek R1, and we want the latest version of that. Now, there's a couple versions of DeepSeek out there. This one, I believe, is the 7 billion parameter model, but there is a 1.5 billion parameter model that runs extremely efficiently on these, on this Raspberry Pi. R1 does work. Now, I use something called NetData to monitor the status and health of my machine and get alerts when things are out of whack. One thing that does happen with this, and this also happens if you're using, let's say, Llama 3.1, where you're going to run into a out of swap space error that comes up periodically. Changing the swap space does help some, but then you also have to change what they call the swappiness, which is how much of the memory has to be full before it starts using swap space. And if you're using swap space for something like this, even with an NVMe drive, it's going to slow it down. So we'll load the model first, and then I'll go into Open WebUI, and then I'll go into a couple of those tweaks that I made to help kind of eke a little more performance out of this, and if nothing else, at least keep some of those errors from tripping the system up and getting it to kind of throw alarms and trip itself up. So let's go ahead and pull down DeepSeek R1. Now this is going to happen fast for me because I've already pulled it down. When you do this, it's probably going to take about as long as it took to download Ollama, if not a little longer. So we're going to do that. Now, if you want to update a model, same thing. You do the exact same thing. You do a pull, and you pull that model in the latest, and it will go out and it will get the digest of that and pull any of the changes down to that model so that it's up to date. There's a command you can run And I'll put this one in here now real quick. Let's say you want to llama list. This is a command I found out there. I'll try and have a reference to the link below here. It's also mentioned in my post on how to set up Ollama, Llama 3, and WebUI. And this is the same update command. You're going to basically list all the models, perform some actions on that to get just the model names that you want, and then pop that into the arguments for Ollama pull, and you're going to pull all of your models, which means you're only going to pull the ones that you have already, but any of them that are in there will be updated. So if I run this, there's no updates. This ran pretty fast, but you would definitely see it here. So now that we've got that, we are going to set up Open WebUI. And to do that, I am going to do Docker pull. As you can see, this is kind of an autocomplete for me. Warp, by the way, great terminal to use. Pull, and then this is the address. This is also going to be in that blog post I'm going to reference below. This is going to pull the latest version of Open WebUI. Now, in my case, I have it installed, so if it pulls anything, it's going to pull up the deltas, the changes to it. When you're doing this, it's going to pull the whole thing and set it up. It is going to take a minute. So we see there's no changes for me. Great. Now, if you're updating it, you're going to do a Docker stop, and the name of it, in this case, Open WebUI. Then you're going to do a Docker RM Open WebUI. The reason I do this is to deconflict when I go ahead and put download the new model, then restart it again to make sure there's no issues with that. You probably could do it without it, but I do it just to be safe. And then this long command right here. This is how we're going to actually run Open WebUI. We need the network host portion in here so that we can access it outside of that. One thing you may also encounter, depending on your setup, is that you may need to have Ollama listen to port 0000. Shouldn't be the case, but it's a possibility. We should be taking care of that with this portion right here, the Docker host internal, but you may run into that. If you do, I think I have that in my troubleshooting blog or troubleshooting section of that on how to actually go ahead and set that to listen to 0000, especially if, let's say, Ollama is running on one machine, but Open WebUI is running on another. So you'll hit that, you'll run that, it'll take a minute, it'll start up, and then we're ready to go. Almost. I'm going to switch screens here, and we are going to look at the web interface of it. Give me just a minute. All right, so here is the browser screen that we're going to look at. And if you're setting up a new user, you're going to have an option to add a new user in here. Since I've already got one, I'm going to go in here, log in with my username and password. All right, there we go. I had to remember which one I used for that for credentials. So we see Llama 3.2 up here, but we see I have a couple of DeepSeeks, including the latest DeepSeek model. Now, if you're running DeepSeek R1 as is, or you're running Llama 3.1. 3.1 is, in my opinion, really good for writing actual worded stuff, paragraphs, documentation, things of that sort. Coding, not quite so great. DeepSeek R1 I'm still testing, and that's probably going to come out in a future video related to a future post once I get to that after robotics season is done. If you don't know, I coach a first robotics team. It's a high school team. We're right in the middle of build season here, so this is kind of taking a little time to add a post for that, or the video for that post that I did a while back, and to catch up on more of those once we get back into a normal rhythm again. Anyway, we're in here, we're set up. Your settings should be okay, but you can always go into your name here, and then admin panel, and we can go to settings. This is the WebUI URL that it has for right now. If you have it externally, you'll want to change this. And then we have connections in here. You want to make sure that this connection works. So you can see I've put 127.0.0.1, which tells me I probably went ahead and made the change to allow Ollama to listen on 0.0.0.0. And if I do a verify connection verified, we're good there. So if you have an issue where that initial setup didn't work, you can always go ahead and put this in manually and make that adjustment. So we've got that running. Let's take a look at a couple things that we did for the swap. I'm going to quick switch back to that. All right, we are going to run a nano on this command. Now, even though you can set the size to larger, right now the max is currently set to 2048. Now I did try and set this to 8192, which is 8 gigs, because that's what it has for memory. And I would have to make more adjustments to the actual swap size, max size, thing like that. So I decided to go with the max size of 2 gig, which is 2048, which you can see right here. And this is in that etc or /etc/dfizz -swap file for the config file. 2048 is 2048 megs, which is 2 gigs. That's the maximum it's going to let you do. Now, in this case, for running the model of 7 billion parameters or less, or actually 8 billion parameters or less, that relieves the problem of filling up your swap space and getting an error and causing it to do a lot of back and forth with that. And we could hit Control X, and if I made changes, I would hit Y here. Okay, so let's take a look at the terminal here. The next command we have cat space /proc /sys/vm/swappiness. This is going to say what percentage of memory is left before it starts going to swap. By default, you're probably going to have 60, which means after 40% of your memory is used up, it's going to start using swap space. And in most functions, that would be okay. But in something memory intensive, like an LLM, it's going to cause considerable slowdown. So what we're going to do is we're going to change that. We're going to go ahead and come up here. We're going to change this to sudo. Now, if you're a Vi guy, use Vi. If you know those commands, more power to you. This is just the editor I like to use. We're going to change that in here from 60 to 20. Control X, and I didn't make changes, but in your case, you would hit Y to save it. Once that's done, ideally what you would want to do is reboot your Pi. Once you've rebooted it, everything should come back up. And in that command that we did earlier for running, find it here. We notice we have restart set to always. And that's so if you have to reboot the Pi, you don't have to remember to bring WebUI back up and running again. Because Ollama is a service, it's just going to go ahead and come back up unless you tell it otherwise. So we're all set there. Now we can go back and check and see how that's working. And if you have a performance monitor, you'll notice that performance. You may not notice a lot of improvement in performance necessarily, but it should be a little bit quicker, and more importantly, you shouldn't be throwing errors about storage, RAM, or swap space in this case. So that, in a nutshell, is how we set that up and run it. What I'm going to do next time is a video on Morphic, which is going to have an abbreviated Ollama setup, just like we did here. And then we're going to set up Morphic. Now, Morphic was touted as a potential self-hosted version of Perplexity. And I also have an article out on that, as well as Perplexica, which is an open source model, which looks a little closer to Perplexity. It has some more robust features in it. It does require setting up a stack, and that can be a little bit finickier. Not that Morphic isn't. Morphic, I've done the Docker build for that, and when I do that video, I'll go over some changes I need to make in order to make that work. However, you can check out my blog. www.saltyoldgeek.com. Look at the Morphic article, and it will have the listed steps in there, and I will make the video based on those steps as well. So I hope you found this useful. I'll have the links to the hardware I use below. Those are affiliate links. If you've got the Honey extension, I'd ask you to turn it off. I'm sure you've probably seen videos now on that, and it does affect it. I'm a small creator here, so any little bit helps. I also have a Buy Me a Coffee page. If you'd like to go ahead and donate to that or donate to the channel directly, I welcome all comments, and until next time, fair winds and following seas.